You two picked the wrong park today." Officer Travis Keller said it with the easy certainty of a man who believed the badge on his chest settled every question before anyone else had the chance to speak. Marcus Reed did not answer immediately. He stood beside a weathered bench in Riverside Memorial Park, one hand resting near a paper coffee cup, his expression calm enough to make Keller's confidence look strangely loud. A few feet away, Darius Cole kept his hands visible and watched the officer with the controlled patience of someone who understood that one careless reaction could change everything. The afternoon around them was almost painfully normal. Children chased a soccer ball across a patch of grass. A jogger passed beneath the oak trees. Somewhere near the recreation center, a basketball struck pavement in a steady rhythm. Yet within 20 feet of that bench, the air had tightened. People were slowing down, looking over, listening. Keller pointed toward Darius. "Step away from the bench." Darius did. No argument. No sudden movement. Just one measured step. Keller glanced toward Marcus. "You too." Marcus complied, then asked quietly, "Are we being detained, officer?" Keller's jaw shifted. It was a simple question, but he reacted as if Marcus had challenged his authority. "You are now." Behind Keller stood Officer Ethan Miller, younger by more than a decade, his attention moving between the two men and his partner. Ethan looked uncertain. Marcus noticed that. He noticed everything. The small red light glowing on Keller's body camera. The teenager near the basketball court raising a phone to record. The gray sport utility vehicle parked across the street beneath a maple tree. And the clock above the recreation center entrance. For 32 in the afternoon. 2 minutes past a moment that had been planned for weeks. Keller looked down at the brown envelope resting beside Marcus's coffee. "What is in that?" Marcus followed his eyes. "Personal property." "That was not what I asked." It was the answer. Darius glanced at Marcus for less than a second. To everyone else, it meant nothing. To Marcus, it said everything. "Stay calm. Do not break cover." "Keller, step closer. You two have been sitting here, watching people, passing something back and forth. That looks suspicious." Marcus kept his voice even. "Suspicious according to what specific behavior?" Keller gave a short laugh, without humor. "You like asking questions." Marcus said nothing. The silence irritated Keller more than an argument would have. Ethan shifted his weight. "Travis, maybe we should establish what actually happened first." Keller did not look at him. "I know what I saw." Marcus heard the sentence and felt something inside him sharpen. Not fear. Recognition. He had heard versions of that phrase before, in reports, interviews, complaints, statements written after the fact. "I know what I saw." Sometimes it meant certainty. Sometimes it meant someone had already decided what they wanted the truth to be. Keller reached toward the handcuffs on his belt. Darius remained still. Marcus looked at Keller directly. "Officer, you may want to think very carefully about your next decision." Keller smiled. "Is that supposed to scare me?" Marcus shook his head once. "No." His eyes moved briefly toward the gray sport utility vehicle across the street, then back to Keller. "It is supposed to help you." Keller's smile faded. He had no idea who Marcus Reed was. He had no idea who Darius Cole was. And more importantly, he had no idea that the two black men he had chosen to confront were not simply sitting in a park. They were waiting for someone. Someone connected to a federal investigation. Someone who was now missing from the place where he was supposed to appear. And as Marcus watched Keller reach again toward his handcuffs, one possibility became impossible to ignore. Maybe the officer standing in front of them had not interrupted the operation by accident. 30 minutes earlier, Riverside Memorial Park had looked like the kind of place where nothing important was supposed to happen. The late afternoon sun stretched across the walking paths, warming the tops of the oak trees and turning the small lake near the eastern trail into a sheet of pale gold. Marcus Reed entered through the south gate carrying a paper coffee cup, moving at the relaxed pace of someone with nowhere urgent to be. Darius Cole came in from the opposite side 3 minutes later wearing a navy windbreaker and holding a bottle of water. They did not greet each other immediately. They were not supposed to. Every detail had been planned before either man stepped within a quarter-mile of the park. Marcus took the bench facing the recreation center. Darius stopped near a vending machine, waited, then joined him without ceremony. To anyone watching, they were simply two black men taking a break on a quiet Tuesday afternoon. That was exactly how the Federal Bureau of Investigation wanted them to look. Marcus glanced toward the clock mounted above the recreation center entrance. 4:23. 7 minutes early. Darius unscrewed the cap on his bottle. No sign yet. Marcus took a slow sip of coffee. There will be. His eyes moved without appearing to search. A black sport utility vehicle sat near the north entrance. A man in a blue jacket stood beside a park map, pretending to read it. A woman pushed a stroller along the west path. An older couple fed birds near the lake. Across the street, beneath the shadow of a maple tree, a gray sport utility vehicle remained parked with dark windows and its engine running. Inside, Supervisory Special Agent Rebecca Sloan monitored the operation through an encrypted audio channel. Marcus touched the face of his watch once. Darius noticed. 5 minutes. Their contact was supposed to approach carrying a red newspaper folder, pause near the bench, and make a simple exchange. No names. No greetings. No unnecessary conversation. The operation had taken nearly 4 months to build. Someone had been leaking sensitive information connected to federal investigations in the region. Locations had been compromised. Meetings had been abandoned. People under surveillance had somehow disappeared minutes before agents arrived. The pattern suggested access, and access suggested someone inside law enforcement. Suspicion was not enough. They needed a link. Today was supposed to provide one. Darius looked toward the lake. Blue Jacket moved again. Marcus had already seen him. The man was now less than 50 yards away, standing near a row of picnic tables. Do not follow him with your eyes. Darius looked away. 4:27. Marcus felt the familiar pressure of an operation narrowing toward its critical moment. Then a marked patrol car appeared at the south entrance. It rolled slowly into the park, passing families, runners, and empty benches before stopping near the basketball court. Darius kept his eyes forward. Local patrol? Marcus watched the reflection in his coffee lid. Maybe. The driver remained inside for several seconds. Then the door opened. Officer Travis Keller stepped out. Even at a distance, Marcus recognized the face from a briefing photograph. Darius noticed the slight change in his expression. You know him? Marcus answered quietly. I know the name. Keller adjusted his uniform and scanned the park. His attention passed over several groups before stopping on Marcus and Darius. He stared a little too long. Marcus looked toward the clock again. 4:29. 1 minute remained before the contact window opened. Somewhere nearby, the person they had come to meet was already moving. Keller started walking toward the bench. Marcus did not move. Neither did Darius. But both men understood the same thing at the same time. The operation had just gained a variable no one had planned for. 4:29. 1 minute before the scheduled contact. Marcus kept his attention on the recreation center clock while Travis Keller crossed the grass toward the bench with the deliberate pace of a man who had already decided what he believed. Darius noticed him first. He is coming straight at us. Marcus kept his eyes forward. I know. The man in the blue jacket had moved again. He was now near the east path, less than 40 yards away, pretending to check his phone. Marcus watched him through the reflection on the dark screen of his own device. The timing was becoming dangerously tight. Their contact should have been approaching the bench by now, but Keller was closing the distance and drawing attention to the exact location the Federal Bureau of Investigation had spent weeks preparing. Behind Keller, Officer Ethan Miller stepped out of the patrol car and followed several paces back. Ethan looked younger, more cautious, and far less certain. His eyes moved across the entire park instead of locking immediately onto Marcus and Darius. That difference registered with Marcus. Keller stopped about 6 feet away. Afternoon. Marcus looked up. Officer. Keller let the silence stretch. His eyes moved from Marcus to Darius, then to the coffee cup, the water bottle, and finally the brown envelope resting beside Marcus on the bench. What are you two doing here? Darius answered evenly. Sitting in a public park. Keller gave a thin smile. I can see that. Marcus glanced at the clock. 4:30. The contact window had opened. Nothing happened. The man in the blue jacket started walking toward the east exit. Marcus felt the shift immediately. Darius did too. Keller looked at both men again. We have had complaints about suspicious activity around here. Marcus asked, what kind of suspicious activity? Keller shrugged slightly. People hanging around, watching families, passing things back and forth. His eyes returned to the envelope. Darius leaned back just enough to look casual. Marcus remained still. Across the street, inside the gray sport utility vehicle, Rebecca Sloan was listening to every word. She would not intervene unless the operation was in danger. The problem was that danger did not always announce itself. Sometimes it arrived in a marked patrol car and asked ordinary questions with assumptions already attached. Keller pointed toward the envelope. "What is that?" Marcus answered, "Personal property." Keller stared at him. "You seem pretty comfortable giving short answers." Marcus replied, "You asked a short question." Ethan looked at Keller, then at the two men. "Maybe we should ask whether there was an actual report tied to them." Keller ignored him. "Identification. Both of you." Darius slowly reached toward his pocket. Marcus did not move. "Are we being detained?" Keller's expression changed. Irritation first, then something harder. "Why do you keep asking that?" Marcus kept his voice calm. "Because the answer matters." The man in the blue jacket disappeared beyond the east path. Their contact was gone. Weeks of planning had just slipped out of sight, and Marcus could not yet tell whether Keller had caused it by accident. Darius handed Ethan a state-issued identification card under his cover identity. Ethan checked it carefully. Keller kept watching Marcus. "And yours?" Marcus said, "You have not answered my question." Keller stepped closer. "You trying to make this difficult?" Marcus finally looked directly at him. "No, I am trying to make it clear." For a second, Keller said nothing. Then Marcus saw something subtle in his face. Recognition, perhaps, or concern. It vanished too quickly to name. But Marcus had spent years learning to notice moments like that. Keller was not simply annoyed anymore. He was studying them. And Marcus was beginning to wonder whether this encounter had started long before the patrol car ever entered the park. Keller held Marcus's gaze for a long moment, then looked down at the brown envelope beside the bench. "What is in there?" Marcus answered without changing his tone. "Personal material." Keller gave a quiet laugh. "That is not very specific." "It does not need to be." Ethan shifted slightly behind him, clearly uncomfortable with the direction of the encounter. Darius remained standing beside the bench, his state-issued identification card still in Ethan's hand. The younger officer glanced at it again, then returned it. "Everything checks out," he said. Keller did not respond. His attention stayed fixed on Marcus. "Identification?" Marcus asked. "Am I legally required to provide it right now?" Keller's jaw tightened. The question was calm, but that calm seemed to irritate him more than open defiance would have. "You keep trying to turn this into a debate," Marcus replied. "I am asking you to explain the basis for the stop." Keller looked around the park. Several people were watching now. A teenager near the basketball court still held up a phone. A woman with a stroller had slowed near the walking path. Ethan noticed them too. "Travis, maybe we should keep this simple." Keller finally looked at his partner. "I am keeping it simple." He pointed toward Marcus and Darius. Two men sitting here watching people, passing an envelope, refusing to answer basic questions. Darius spoke quietly. "We answered your questions." Keller turned toward him. "You answered what you wanted to answer." Marcus glanced toward the recreation center clock. 4:33. Their contact had been gone for 3 minutes. Every second mattered now. If the courier believed the location had been compromised, there might not be another opportunity. Across the street, Rebecca Sloan was still listening. Marcus knew she would be deciding whether to shut the operation down completely. Keller stepped closer to the bench and pointed again at the envelope. "Open it." Marcus said, "No." The answer was immediate. Ethan looked at Keller. Keller looked back at Marcus. "Excuse me. You asked me to open personal property without explaining what law you believe has been violated." "My answer is no." Keller's expression hardened. "You think knowing a few legal phrases makes you smarter than everyone else?" Marcus shook his head once. "No, I think questions matter." Darius looked at him briefly. That was when he understood what Marcus was doing. This was no longer only about protecting their cover. Marcus was creating a record. Every question, every answer, every shift in Keller's reasoning. The body camera on Keller's chest was still recording. Marcus glanced at the small red light, then back at Keller. "Is your body camera active?" Keller's eyes narrowed. "Why?" "Because I want the record to be clear." Ethan took a slow breath. Keller looked down at the camera as though noticing it for the first time. "You worried about being recorded?" Marcus answered, "No." A beat of silence followed. "I want you recorded." The teenager with the phone moved a little closer. Keller noticed him. "Put the phone down." Ethan immediately said, "He is on public property." Keller turned sharply. "Miller." Ethan did not argue, but he did not withdraw the statement either. The tension changed. Marcus could feel it. Keller was now being challenged from two directions, not with anger, but with procedure. That made him more unpredictable. Keller reached toward the envelope. Marcus's voice became firmer. "Officer, do not open that." Keller stopped with his hand inches away. "Is that a threat?" "No." Marcus met his eyes. "It is a warning that you may not understand what you are interfering with." Keller stared at him, then slowly smiled. "Now that sounds interesting." He picked up the envelope. Darius looked at Marcus. Marcus gave the smallest possible nod. "Let him choose." Keller slid one finger beneath the flap. Across the street, Rebecca's voice came softly through Marcus's concealed earpiece. "Keep him talking." Marcus did not react. Keller opened the envelope and looked inside. The confidence left his face almost instantly, because staring back at him from the single photograph inside was his own face. Keller stared at the photograph for several seconds without speaking. The image had been taken from across a street at night, just clear enough to show him standing beside a dark sedan outside West Harbor Warehouse number 12. No caption, no explanation, just Keller, the warehouse, and a timestamp printed along the bottom edge. Ethan leaned slightly closer. "What is it?" Keller folded the photograph too quickly and pushed it back into the envelope. "Nothing." Marcus watched the movement. So did Darius. Across the street, Rebecca Sloan heard the silence that followed and understood what it meant. Keller looked at Marcus with a different expression now. The suspicion was still there, but something else had entered it. Unease. "Where did you get that?" he asked. Marcus kept his voice calm. "You were warned not to open it." Keller stepped closer. "I asked where you got it." Marcus said nothing. Darius shifted his weight slightly, not because he was nervous, but because he recognized the change in the situation. Keller had gone from searching for something suspicious to defending himself from a question no one had asked yet. Ethan noticed too. "Travis, why are you in the picture?" Keller looked at him sharply. "You do not know what you are looking at." Ethan answered, "I know what you look like." Keller ignored him and focused on Marcus. "Were you following me?" Marcus replied. "Why would that concern you?" Keller's jaw tightened. "Because private citizens do not get to track police officers and collect photographs like this." Marcus tilted his head slightly. "You are making a lot of assumptions." Keller glanced toward the recreation center clock, then toward the parking lot, as though calculating something. For 34, the original contact had been gone for 4 minutes. Marcus could feel the operation changing shape. The man in the blue jacket had vanished. The planned exchange was finished before it began. But Keller's reaction had created a new question. Marcus spoke softly. "Officer Keller, were you at West Harbor Warehouse number 12 last Thursday night?" Ethan turned toward him. Keller did not answer immediately. "Why?" Marcus repeated the question. "Were you there?" Keller gave a short, dismissive laugh. "I go a lot of places." "On duty?" Marcus asked. Another pause. Keller's eyes moved toward the envelope in his hand. "That is none of your business." Darius looked at Marcus. That response mattered. Marcus heard Rebecca's voice through his concealed earpiece. "Keep pressing carefully. We are checking vehicle logs now." Marcus gave no visible sign that he had heard her. Keller looked around and realized more people were watching. The teenager with the phone was still recording. A man near the basketball court had stopped tying his shoe and was staring openly now. Ethan stood with his arms at his sides, no longer looking like Keller's backup. He looked like a witness. Keller seemed to feel that shift too. "Both of you are coming downtown," he said suddenly. Ethan frowned. "For what?" Keller turned on him. "Suspicious activity. Possible obstruction." Ethan shook his head. "They have not obstructed anything." Keller's voice hardened. "Miller, do your job." Ethan did not move. Marcus looked at Keller and said, "You should be very careful with the next reason you invent." Keller stared at him. "Invent?" Marcus nodded toward the body camera. "Your own recording will answer that." For the first time, Keller glanced down at the red light on his chest with visible discomfort. He reached toward the camera. Ethan immediately said, "Leave it on." Keller froze. The park seemed to go quiet around them. Marcus watched Keller's face and understood. Something important. The photograph had not proven he was part of the leak, but his reaction had revealed that West Harbor meant something to him. And now, with the camera running and his own partner questioning him, Keller was beginning to make choices that evidence could measure. The red light on Keller's body camera kept glowing. For several seconds, nobody moved. Ethan's words, "Leave it on," seemed to hang between them like a line that could not be crossed without consequences. Keller lowered his hand slowly, but the frustration in his face deepened. You are taking their side now? He asked. Ethan answered carefully. I am taking the side of having a complete record. Marcus watched both men, listening to the words while thinking about the photograph, the warehouse, and the missing contact. Across the street, Rebecca Sloan was already comparing department vehicle logs against the timestamp on the image. Darius stood beside Marcus, calm but alert. He knew their original operation was over. The person they had come to meet was gone. What remained was something less controlled and possibly more important. Keller looked back at Marcus. You keep acting like you know something. Marcus replied. Maybe I know enough to keep asking questions. Keller gave a bitter smile. You are not the one asking questions here. That changed when you opened the envelope. The smile disappeared. Ethan glanced toward Keller again. Travis, were you at West Harbor or not? Keller ignored him. Marcus noticed the avoidance. Rebecca's voice came softly through Marcus's concealed earpiece. Department vehicle logs show his patrol unit was returned at 7:12 that night. The photograph timestamp is 10:46. No official assignment near West Harbor. Marcus kept his expression neutral. That did not prove Keller had done anything wrong, but it made his earlier answer more significant. Marcus said, Your patrol car was off the road before 8 that night. Keller's eyes narrowed. How would you know that? Marcus did not answer. Keller looked at Darius, then back at Marcus. Who are you? Darius spoke before Marcus could. The question is why you are so worried about who we are. Keller took a breath and looked around. The park was quieter now. The soccer field had begun to empty. The teenager with the phone had moved closer, still recording. A woman near the walking trail stopped beside a bench and pretended to check her messages while listening. Keller seemed aware of every witness. Enough, he said. Both of you turn around. We are going downtown until we sort this out. Ethan shook his head. We still do not have a clear charge. They are interfering with an investigation. Marcus said, What investigation? Keller answered immediately. Mine. Marcus paused. What crime are you investigating? Keller opened his mouth, then stopped. The silence answered more clearly than any explanation could have. Ethan looked down. Darius looked toward Marcus. Keller's certainty was collapsing under the weight of questions he should have been able to answer from the beginning. Rebecca spoke again through the earpiece. We are ending the undercover phase. Use your judgment. Marcus breathed out slowly. He had spent years learning that timing mattered more than drama. Reveal too early and you lose information. Reveal too late and you create unnecessary risk. Keller reached toward his radio. I am calling this in. Marcus said. Before you do, understand that everything from this point forward becomes part of a much larger record. Keller stared at him. Another warning? Marcus shook his head. A fact. Darius looked at Marcus and gave the smallest nod. The decision had been made. Their cover had served its purpose. Marcus slowly reached inside his jacket, keeping both hands visible. Ethan immediately watched the movement, but did not react aggressively. Marcus removed a leather credential wallet and held it at chest level. The federal seal caught the afternoon light. Keller looked at it once, then again, as though his mind refused to accept what his eyes were reading. Federal Bureau of Investigation. Special Agent Marcus Reed. Darius produced his own credentials beside him. Special Agent Darius Cole. Keller's expression went completely still. Marcus closed the wallet and said quietly, Officer Keller, this stopped being your investigation. The moment you chose to interfere with ours. Keller stared at the credentials, and for the first time that afternoon, he had nothing ready to say. The park seemed to hold its breath with him. Ethan looked from Marcus to Darius, then back to Keller, and the uncertainty in his face gave way to something closer to alarm. Federal Bureau of Investigation? He asked. Darius closed his credential wallet. Yes. Keller tried to recover quickly. You should have identified yourselves from the beginning. Marcus answered. We were working undercover, and I was doing my job. Marcus looked at the brown envelope still in Keller's hand. Were you? Keller's face tightened. Before he could answer, the gray sport utility vehicle across the street pulled away from the curb and entered the park. It stopped near the patrol car. Rebecca Sloan stepped out, followed by 2 federal agents in plain clothes. She walked toward them without urgency, but every step carried the confidence of someone who already understood the scene. Keller watched her approach. Marcus did not. His attention stayed on Keller. Rebecca stopped beside him. Agent Reed. Marcus gave a short nod. Supervisory Special Agent Sloan. Keller looked between them. So this whole thing was a setup? Rebecca answered, no. You were not the target of today's operation. Keller seemed relieved for half a second. Rebecca continued. At least, not when it started. The relief disappeared. Ethan looked at her sharply. Darius stayed quiet. Rebecca extended one hand toward Keller. The envelope. Keller hesitated. Why? Because it contains material connected to an active federal investigation. It has a picture of me. Rebecca nodded. We know. Keller looked toward Marcus. Then tell me why. Marcus answered. You were photographed outside West Harbor Warehouse number 12 last Thursday night at 10:46. Keller's eyes moved away. I already told you, I go a lot of places. Rebecca said. Your department vehicle was logged back in more than 3 hours earlier. There was no assignment, call, or report placing you anywhere near West Harbor. Keller gave a dismissive laugh. So I was off duty. That is not a crime. Marcus replied. No one said it was. Again, Keller had defended himself before anyone accused him. Ethan noticed. Rebecca noticed. The body camera noticed too. Keller looked down at the red light on his chest, and then back up. You are twisting everything I say. Rebecca's voice stayed level. Then let the record speak for itself. Keller handed over the envelope, but reluctantly. Rebecca passed it to one of the agents behind her. Preserve that exactly as received. Then she looked at Ethan. Officer Miller, have you ever seen Officer Keller at West Harbor or heard him mention that location? Ethan hesitated. Keller turned toward him. You do not have to answer that. Rebecca's eyes moved to Keller. He can decide that for himself. The pause stretched. Ethan looked at the grass, then toward the patrol car. I heard him mention a warehouse once. Keller's expression changed. Ethan, the younger officer looked up. You said a schedule had changed. You said somebody needed to move early. Marcus felt the investigation shift again. Rebecca asked, when? Ethan thought for a moment. About 3 weeks ago. Late shift. Keller shook his head. That could mean anything. Darius finally spoke. Maybe it could. He looked at Keller. That is why evidence matters more than assumptions. The words landed cleanly. Keller had started the afternoon treating 2 black men as suspicious because of what he thought he saw. Now every claim about him was being measured against records, timestamps, witnesses, and recorded statements. Marcus watched Keller understand the difference. Suspicion had brought him to the bench. Evidence was beginning to keep him there. Ethan's statement changed the balance of the scene more than Keller seemed willing to admit. Rebecca did not react dramatically. She simply looked at the younger officer and asked, What exactly did you hear? Ethan took a slow breath. It was near the end of shift. Keller was on his phone outside the precinct. I heard him say the schedule had changed and somebody needed to move before midnight. Keller shook his head. That could have been about anything. Rebecca nodded once. It could have been. Marcus watched Keller carefully. The answer was reasonable, but his posture was not. He looked toward the patrol car again, then toward the teenager recording near the basketball court, then toward the envelope now secured by one of Rebecca's agents. His attention kept moving, searching for control. Darius noticed the same thing. You are worried about the wrong part, he said. Keller looked at him. Excuse me. Darius kept his voice calm. If the call was innocent, the records will show that. If the warehouse visit had a legitimate reason, the records will show that too. Marcus added, that is what evidence is for. The words carried a quiet weight because that standard had never been extended to Marcus and Darius when Keller first approached them. Rebecca turned back to Ethan. Have there been other incidents that concerned you? Ethan hesitated longer this time. Keller stared at him. Think very carefully before you start inventing things. Ethan looked at Keller, then at the red light on the body camera. I have been thinking carefully for 6 months. The sentence silenced everyone. Rebecca said nothing, giving him space. Ethan continued. I started noticing reports that changed after they were submitted. Times adjusted. Locations rewritten. Reasons for stops added later. Keller's face tightened. You were talking about routine corrections. Some were, Ethan said. Some were not. Marcus listened without interrupting. What kind were not? Ethan looked toward him. Stops where the original reason did not match what I heard at the scene. He paused. A lot of them involved black men. Keller immediately responded, that is ridiculous. Ethan did not look away. Then let internal affairs review them. That was the moment Marcus saw the real shift. Ethan was no longer speaking as Keller's partner, trying to calm him down. He was speaking as someone who had already crossed an internal line months earlier and had finally decided silence was more dangerous than honesty. Rebecca asked, "Did you keep anything?" Ethan nodded. "Dates, report numbers, vehicle logs, screenshots of revisions." Keller stared at him. "You copied department records?" Ethan answered, "I copied what I thought might disappear." Rebecca's expression remained composed, but her tone sharpened. "Where are they?" "At home. Encrypted drive." One of the federal agents behind Rebecca quietly made a note. Keller stepped closer to Ethan, but Marcus spoke before the tension could rise. "Keep this professional." Keller turned toward him. "Stay out of this." Marcus met his eyes. "You brought us into it." The words were simple, final. Rebecca then looked toward Keller's body camera. "Do not alter, delete, or remove any recording from today. Do not modify any report related to this encounter. Your supervisor and internal affairs will be notified, and federal investigators will coordinate preservation of any material relevant to our case." Keller gave a bitter laugh. "So now I am being investigated because I questioned two men in a park?" Marcus answered, "No." Keller looked at him. Marcus continued, "You are being questioned because the facts around your own actions stopped matching your assumptions." Ethan looked toward the ground. Rebecca's agent secured the envelope in an evidence sleeve. The afternoon had grown quieter, shadows stretching farther across the grass. The confrontation had begun with Keller demanding to know why two black men belonged on a park bench. Now the question hanging over Riverside Memorial Park was no longer who Marcus and Darius were. It was why Keller had been at West Harbor, what had changed in those reports, and how long people inside his own department had been afraid to ask. By the time Captain Daniel Brooks arrived at Riverside Memorial Park, the light had softened and most families had begun heading home. He crossed the grass with the hurried focus of someone who had already heard enough over the phone to know this was no ordinary field complaint. Rebecca Sloan met him several yards from the patrol car and spoke quietly for less than 2 minutes. Marcus could not hear every word, but he saw Brooks look first at Keller, then at Ethan, then at the brown envelope now sealed as evidence. The captain's expression changed slowly from confusion to concern. When Rebecca finished, Brooks walked toward Keller. "Turn over your department phone and your vehicle keys." Keller stared at him. "Captain, this is being blown completely out of proportion." Brooks did not raise his voice. "Then the review will show that." Keller looked toward Ethan as if expecting support. None came. Ethan stood near Rebecca, answering questions about dates, report numbers, and the encrypted drive he said contained copies of altered records. Brooks held out his hand again. Keller finally surrendered the keys and phone. "Am I under arrest?" he asked. Rebecca answered before Brooks could. "No. At this point, you are being directed to preserve evidence and cooperate with both an internal review and a federal inquiry." Keller gave a bitter laugh. "All because I questioned two guys sitting in a park." Marcus stepped forward slightly. "No." Keller looked at him. Marcus continued, "Because what you did after you approached us created questions that now have to be answered." Darius stood beside him, quiet but attentive. Rebecca glanced toward the body camera. "That recording will be preserved. So will the public video, your reports, vehicle logs, communication records, and any relevant department files." Keller's confidence had faded, but he still clung to one argument. "You are treating me like I am guilty." Brooks shook his head. "You are being treated like an officer whose conduct requires review. There is a difference." The words seemed to land harder because they mirrored the standard Keller had refused to give Marcus and Darius earlier. No assumption. No instant judgment. Evidence first. Ethan looked toward Keller. "That is all I wanted months ago." Keller turned to him. "You could have come to me." Ethan answered quietly. "I did not know if coming to you was safe for the record." Brooks closed his eyes for a second, then looked toward Rebecca. "Internal affairs will have everything tonight." Rebecca nodded. "We will coordinate on anything connected to West Harbor." The sun was now low behind the oak trees, casting long shadows across the emptying park. The basketball court had gone quiet. The teenager who had recorded the encounter stood near his bicycle, still watching from a distance. Nothing about the scene looked dramatic anymore. No shouting, no spectacle, just documents, devices, testimony, and a body camera still blinking red. Keller looked at Marcus one last time. "You think you proved something today?" Marcus held his gaze. "Not because of who we are." Keller said nothing. Marcus continued. You showed everyone who you chose to be when you thought we were just two black men sitting on a bench. The words stayed between them. No celebration followed. No one smiled. Darius looked toward the recreation center clock, now nearing 5 o'clock. The operation they had planned had failed, but something else had surfaced in its place. Rebecca turned toward Marcus and Darius. "We will debrief downtown." Marcus nodded, then looked back once more at Keller. The first mistake was seeing us as criminals. The last mistake was believing no one was watching. Keller had no answer. And as evening settled over Riverside Memorial Park, the lesson became impossible to ignore. He had judged two men by the color of their skin. The evidence would judge him by the choices he made.